My name is Emma, and I'm 31 years old. I live in Rosewood, Illinois now, in a quiet little house I bought with every ounce of strength I could muster over the past 10 years. But before I had this life, I had a family. And in that family, I was never really seen, not truly. From as early as I can remember, love in our home came with a price tag and conditions. If you were charming, adorable, and agreeable, you were cherished. If you asked for attention or disagreed, you were a problem. I, unfortunately, was always the latter. When I was 5, my younger sister Chloe was born. My mother, Diane, was instantly obsessed. She ordered baby items from every catalog, stitched Chloe's name into pillowcases, and declared to every visitor that Chloe was her little angel. My father, Richard, who once used to take me to the park every Saturday, suddenly had no time for me. Every moment became about Chloe, her burps, her giggles, her tiny footsteps. And I faded into the background. One day, I remember drawing a picture of a flying horse. I was so proud. The colors were bright, the wings detailed. I showed it to Mom while she was feeding Chloe. She gave it a quick glance and frowned. A blue horse? That doesn't make any sense. Chloe draws sunflowers, like a real little artist. That single sentence crushed me. I folded my drawing and stuffed it under my bed. It never made it to the fridge, unlike Chloe's crayon scribbles, which were displayed like they belonged in a museum. Chloe had dimples and a laugh like bells. I had glasses and a quiet voice. By second grade, my teachers said I was gifted. At home, my mother told her friends, "Emma's smart but a little stiff. Not as bubbly as Chloe." They laughed. I did too, pretending it didn't sting. But it did. Every time. By the time I turned 10, I had already learned how to disappear. When I won first prize in a statewide story competition, no one from my family came to the ceremony. My parents were busy. Chloe had her first ballet class. I brought the certificate home and handed it to Mom. She skimmed it and said, "That's fine, but don't let your brain turn you into a robot." I remember that moment more than I remember the award itself. My father only asked, "Was there a cash prize?" I shook my head. He nodded like he lost interest. Chloe once got a B+ in English and they ordered cake and balloons. I quietly chewed on leftovers in the kitchen while they blasted music and danced. I wasn't jealous of her. I was just invisible. By my teenage years, I wasn't just the forgotten daughter. I was the unpaid housekeeper, the quiet helper, the one who filled in every gap my family pretended not to see. After school, I'd do my homework, then wash the dishes, fold laundry, vacuum the living room, and prep dinner, all while Chloe sat on the couch rehearsing for her next choir audition. Whenever I spoke up, even gently, my mother would snap, "You're the older sister. You should sacrifice." But I began to wonder, how much sacrifice is enough? I can't recall the last time either of my parents hugged me, but I vividly remember the night I fell asleep at the kitchen table from hunger, my homework half done, my stomach hollow. My mother shook me awake the next morning and said coldly, "Stop pretending to be dramatic. There's still laundry left." That was when something shifted in me. I stopped hoping. I stopped waiting for praise, for a hug, for a glimmer of recognition. I built a quiet dream in my heart, not of winning their love, but of leaving. The day I turned 18, I packed an old suitcase and left without fanfare. I had earned a full scholarship to Rosewood University, and I wasn't going to waste a second looking back. Chloe was live-streaming a tour of her newly decorated bedroom. My mother sent me one text: "Good riddance. Don't bring shame to the family." That was the closest thing I got to a goodbye. In Rosewood, I saw snow pile onto rooftops for the first time. I lived in a cramped dorm room with a leaky faucet and a rusted electric stove. But it was mine. It was freedom. I studied clinical laboratory science, a subject my mom once said was for girls with no social life. But I loved it. I loved the clarity of it, the logic, the precision. Unlike home, where emotions were twisted and silence was expected, science made sense. I worked nights at the library, cleaned labs on weekends, and kept a strict budget. No parties. No vacations. No shopping sprees. Every dollar I saved was sacred. I didn't just want to escape the past. I wanted to build something no one could take away. And I did. Just after my 29th birthday, I bought my first home, a beautiful 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb of Rosewood. It wasn't flashy, but it was everything I dreamed of. The price tag was steep, $500,000. I used the savings I'd hoarded over 8 years for the down payment, nearly half. It had a tiny backyard with a cherry tree, a balcony perfect for reading, and a white-tiled kitchen with a real oven. Not the dorm one I had once cried over. I painted every wall myself, picked the curtains, installed the knobs. It wasn't just a house. It was proof that I mattered, that I was enough. I even sent a short card to my family's address. I'm doing fine. No need to worry. I didn't expect a reply, and I didn't get one. 3 months after I moved into my home, I received a message that froze me in place. It was from my mother, Diane, the woman who had barely acknowledged my existence for over a decade. The text was short, almost casual in tone. Emma, can you call me? It's something serious about Chloe. It's important. I stared at the message for a long time, rereading it like there might be a hidden meaning between the words. I hadn't spoken to her in years. Not a call. Not a birthday text. Not even a forwarded chain email. And now, suddenly, something was serious. About Chloe, of course, always Chloe. I didn't reply. But a week later, I received an elegant cream-colored envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a formal invitation to Chloe's engagement party. The venue? A rented estate in Rosewood. Date? 2 weeks from now. Alongside the invitation was a handwritten card from my mother. It said, "We need to talk before the event. Don't be that Emma. Be a good sister." There was no warmth in the words. No apology. Just the same guilt-wrapped manipulation I had grown up with. Part of me wanted to tear the invite in two. Another part, the part that still clung to the idea of closure, hesitated. In the end, I went. I wore a simple black dress. Not too formal, not too plain. I styled my hair neatly, chose small pearl earrings, and carried a modest silver photo frame as a gift. It was engraved with, "Wishing you happiness." It wasn't expensive, but it was sincere. When I arrived, the place was stunning. The mansion glowed under string lights. Guests sipped champagne in the marble-floored lobby. Chloe stood at the center in a blush pink gown, a diamond ring catching the light with every flick of her hand. She looked like a movie star. Her fiancé, David, stood proudly beside her, tall, calm, and kind-faced. He gave me a polite smile when our eyes met. "Chloe?" She barely glanced at me. As I placed the gift on the table, my mother appeared beside me. Her smile was polite, too polite. The kind people wear in public when there's something ugly beneath it. She leaned in slightly and said, "Your father would like to speak to you. He's in the side room." I froze. A private conversation with my father? After all these years? But I nodded. Something in me, curiosity, maybe pulled me down that hallway. I hadn't even walked in yet, and my stomach was already tightening. The side room was dimly lit, away from the hum of clinking glasses and soft jazz playing in the main hall. My father, Richard, stood by a large window, hands in his pockets, staring out into the perfectly trimmed garden. He didn't look up as I entered. "You've done well for yourself," he said after a long pause, still not facing me. "Nice house. Nice job. Living alone, right?" "I'm doing fine," I replied flatly. He turned to face me then, his expression unreadable. "Chloe's getting married. She and David need a fresh start. A foundation." I nodded slowly, unsure where this was going, though my gut already knew. My mother entered, as if on cue, her heels tapping the polished floor like a metronome. She walked over to stand beside him, clasping her hands together. "We were thinking," she said, "this could be your way of showing Chloe some support, some love." Then my father said it without flinching. "You should transfer the house to them. Make it a wedding gift." My heart stopped for a second. I blinked. "What?" he repeated, slower this time. The house. You're not using it for anything important. You live alone. Chloe and David are starting their life. It would mean a lot coming from you. I laughed, a short, dry sound I hadn't meant to release. That house cost me nearly $500,000, I said. I worked 2 jobs for nearly a decade to afford the down payment. And you think I should just hand it over? It's your house, my mother added, as if that made it more logical. That's why it would be meaningful. Besides, you don't have children. You don't need that much space. So, because I live alone, I said, my voice tightening, I'm unworthy of keeping what I earned. Emma, she said, her tone sharpening, don't be selfish. Family means sacrifice. I stared at her, cold disbelief building inside me. I sacrificed my whole childhood, and you never called that love. My father's face hardened. It's one house. We're not asking you to give up your career. I stepped back. No. I'm not giving up my home. And if anyone in this family had ever cared about me, they wouldn't ask. My mother's smile faltered, her eyes darkening. You're making a mistake. This could have been simple. It is, I said, stepping toward the door. The answer is no. As I walked away, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sad. That after all these years, all the distance, they hadn't changed at all. They never would. And something deep down told me, this wasn't the end of it. I considered skipping the wedding. After the confrontation at the engagement party, I told myself I owed them nothing. Not my time, not my presence, certainly not my peace. But something inside me still couldn't let go completely. Maybe I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of painting me as the bitter sister who didn't show up. Or maybe a part of me still craved closure. The ceremony was held in a sprawling glass conservatory in Rosewood. Every inch of the place screamed extravagance. Cream velvet chairs, hanging chandeliers, gold-accented flatware, and custom floral arrangements that probably cost more than my monthly paycheck. Chloe stood under the archway in a shimmering white gown, her smile wide, her eyes scanning the crowd like a queen overseeing her court. She didn't acknowledge me. Not even a nod. I was seated at a back table near the exit, far from the family, far from everything. The vows were exchanged. Champagne poured. Plates clinked with hors d'oeuvres. I had just reached for a glass of water when my mother appeared beside me again, her voice smooth and false. Your father wants to speak with you. One last time. Please don't cause a scene. I should have said no. But again, that nagging thread of old obligation tugged at me. The corner they led me to was curtained off from the main hall, private enough to hide secrets, not private enough to silence them. Richard stood near a small table adorned with cake toppers and champagne flutes. You still have a chance to do the right thing, he said quietly. It's not too late to transfer the house. I crossed my arms. You're still asking for that? My mother appeared behind me again, as if she'd never left. We didn't raise you to be so cold. A house isn't more important than your sister's happiness. I stared at them both, my voice low but firm. I bought that house with every part of myself you two never cared about. It's not just a house, it's my life. Stop talking like a victim, Richard snapped. You should be grateful we even invited you. Grateful. I laughed under my breath. For what? Years of being ignored. You're choosing this path, he growled. You're turning your back on your family. I've been invisible in this family since Chloe was born, I said. So, let's not pretend there's anything left to turn my back on. That's when it happened. His hand moved so quickly, I barely saw it coming. Slap. His palm struck my face hard, across the cheek, loud enough to make the curtains behind me flutter from the force. A burning sting exploded across my jaw as I stumbled back, nearly losing my balance. I gasped, not just from the pain but from the sheer shock. Dad, a voice cried. I turned to see David's friend Mark, a guest from the groom's side, rushing forward from the hall. What the hell did you just do? Stay out of this, Richard barked. Mark pulled out his phone without hesitation. I'm calling 911. You just hit her. You think no one saw that? Guests nearby were beginning to turn, whispers growing. Chloe stood frozen at the head table, her smile gone, replaced by pale disbelief. I touched my cheek. My fingers came away red. Blood from the inside of my lip. My mother didn't move. She didn't even flinch. She stood beside Richard, breathing heavily, her expression filled with rage. "You brought this on yourself," she spat. "Always so ungrateful." Mark stepped in front of me protectively, still on the phone. "Yes, we need officers and medical support. A woman's been assaulted at a wedding reception. The man is still on site." I didn't know what hurt more, the slap, or the fact that neither of my parents showed a flicker of regret. The next few minutes blurred into chaos. Voices rose, guests pulled out their phones, and somewhere through the noise, I heard the faint wail of sirens approaching the venue. My face throbbed from where my father had slapped me, and my lip was still bleeding, but I held myself upright. Not because I felt strong, but because I refused to let them see me crumble. Richard didn't try to flee. He stood tall, arms crossed, his jaw set in stubborn defiance. Diane remained beside him, like a queen guarding her crumbling throne. But their confidence faltered the moment two uniformed officers stepped through the entrance, followed by a paramedic team. A hush fell over the hall. Guests backed away from the scene, some in shock, others in disbelief. The fairy tale wedding had just turned into a live crime scene. The first officer, Officer Grant, approached with calm authority. "Can someone explain what happened?" Mark stepped forward immediately. "I witnessed the man, Richard, slap her across the face hard. You can check the security cameras. She's injured. She needs medical attention." Officer Grant turned to me gently. "Ma'am, are you okay to speak?" I nodded. My voice was steady, but my hands were trembling. "He hit me. I said no to giving up my house, and he slapped me." Another officer approached Richard and read his rights aloud. "Sir, you are under arrest for assault. You have the right to remain silent." "What?" Diane cried, stepping forward. "She's manipulating you. She wants to ruin Chloe's day." "She was bleeding," Mark interjected. "Don't even try it." "Ma'am," the second officer said to Diane, "please remain calm. You're being detained for obstruction and emotional intimidation." Handcuffs clicked into place. Gasps filled the air as my parents were cuffed in front of more than 150 guests. People who had greeted them earlier now stood frozen, backing away slowly, unsure what to say, or too shocked to speak at all. Chloe rushed forward, her wedding gown sweeping across the floor. "This is insane. She's exaggerating. You don't have to arrest them." But Officer Grant held up a hand. "We'll take statements at the station. If they're innocent, it will come out. For now, we're following protocol." David, her fiancé, stood nearby, silent and horrified. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Lawson, watched everything unfold. Finally, Mrs. Lawson said aloud what everyone else was thinking. He struck his own daughter. At her sister's wedding. David looked around slowly, his face turning pale. "Emma, I am so sorry." But I didn't respond. I couldn't. As the paramedics cleaned the cut inside my lip and checked my cheek for swelling, I glanced at my mother one last time. Her eyes were locked on me, filled with fury, not remorse. As Richard and Diane were let out in handcuffs, the crowd parted in silence. There was no music, no more dancing, no bouquet toss, just the hollow sound of shoes on marble and a celebration that had been shattered by truth. I was escorted to the ambulance, my cheek packed gently with gauze, the ache still pulsing beneath my skin. But it wasn't just the slap that hurt, it was everything behind it. The years of silence. The moments of being told I was less than. The betrayal that no amount of distance had ever truly dulled. As the vehicle pulled away from the venue, I glanced back through the window. The glass walls of the conservatory gleamed under the soft afternoon sun, but inside, the magic was gone. The wedding was over. In the hospital, the ER team ran tests to ensure I hadn't suffered any fractures. Thankfully, the blow had not caused internal damage, just swelling, a split lip, and bruising. They prescribed anti-inflammatories and gave instructions for rest and monitoring. But emotionally, I felt bruised in places no medicine could reach. To my surprise, David showed up later that evening with a bouquet of purple lilies, my favorite. He looked like he hadn't slept. His voice was soft, guilt-ridden. "I can't believe they did that to you," he said, lowering himself into the chair beside my bed. "I'm sorry I didn't step in sooner. I didn't know things were that bad." "They've always been that bad," I said. "They just kept it quiet. And I played along until I stopped." He nodded, eyes full of shame. "My parents are furious. They said this isn't just about the slap, it's about who they are, how they behave. They're calling off the wedding." I sat up slowly. "Wait, what?" David nodded. "When they saw your father hit you and your mother stand there and say nothing, my parents couldn't let that slide. Neither can I." His words struck me like a quiet thunder. Chloe hadn't reached out. Not once. No text. No call. No apology. David leaned forward. "I know this is all overwhelming, but if you need legal support, I want to help. My dad knows a good attorney, someone who handles domestic and family-related abuse cases." I hesitated. "You think I should take legal action?" He looked me in the eyes. "Emma, what they did wasn't just a moment of anger. It was the culmination of years of abuse. You stood up for yourself, and they punished you for it. That's not okay. That's criminal." He gave me the name, Thomas Carter, a highly respected family law attorney. I didn't respond right away. I needed to breathe, to think. But somewhere deep in my chest, the idea had already taken root. I had been silenced my entire life. Maybe it was finally time to speak, not just with words, but with action. 3 days later, I was discharged from the hospital with a stitched lip, a swollen cheek, and a decision I could no longer avoid. My parents hadn't reached out. Not a single message. Not even from Chloe, whose perfect day had collapsed in front of over 100 people. But David, the man she was supposed to marry, visited every single day. Not out of guilt, but out of quiet concern. He brought meals, shared gentle stories, and gave me space without vanishing. On the morning of my release, I found him waiting in the hospital lobby with a dark leather folder in hand. "I didn't want to pressure you," he said, "but I talked to Thomas Carter. He's willing to meet you privately, no pressure to file anything. He just wants to help." I took the folder. My fingers trembled slightly, but I nodded. "Set it up." That afternoon, I sat across from Mr. Carter in his office. He was in his early 40s, clean-cut, calm, and sharp. There was no pity in his voice, only clarity. "Emma," he began, "based on what David told me and what you've described, we're looking at 3 major issues: physical assault, emotional abuse, and attempted coercion of property ownership. These are serious charges, and your case is extremely strong." I looked down at the folder in front of me. Inside were printed photos of my injuries, hospital documentation, text messages, the wedding invitation, and witness statements already gathered by David and his parents. Even Mark, the man who had called 911, had submitted a signed written account. "We have enough evidence to proceed to trial," Thomas said firmly. "We'll serve formal notice to your parents, then file charges in Lake County District Court. You'll also have the option to sue for emotional damages and legal costs." I took a breath, the air tight in my lungs. "Will this make me the villain?" I asked quietly. Thomas looked at me, without hesitation.
"No."
"What they did made them the villains. You're standing up for yourself, something too many victims never get to do." And that's when I signed the authorization. My hand was steady this time. No more silence. No more guilt. The next day, legal proceedings began. Thomas's team submitted the complaint to the court. Within 72 hours, formal notices were delivered to Richard and Diane. I learned they had hired a defense attorney who instantly tried to dismiss the case, claiming it was a family misunderstanding and an attempt at public embarrassment. But Thomas smiled when he heard that. "They'll regret using those words," he said. "We're not backing down." For the first time in my life, I felt something I'd never felt with my family: power. Not power to harm, but power to protect myself. And maybe, just maybe, to heal. The courthouse felt colder than I expected. The air was clinical, the walls lined with portraits of judges and plaques etched with laws. I wore a simple gray suit. No makeup, just lip balm to soothe the healing cut. My cheek was still slightly discolored. But I stood tall. Not for them, for me. The courtroom was full. To my left sat Thomas Carter, our file of evidence thick and ready. To my right, in the front row, sat David, calm and quietly encouraging. Across the aisle were Richard and Diane, both stiff, both trying to look dignified. Chloe wasn't there. They didn't speak to me. Not once. The trial lasted 3 days. Thomas presented everything with surgical precision. The photo of my bruised face. My medical records. Security camera footage from the wedding venue showing the slap. Multiple witnesses took the stand. Mark, David's mother. Even one of Chloe's friends who broke down crying as she described seeing me stumble from the blow. Then it was my turn. I stood before the judge, a composed woman in her 60s named Judge Evelyn Ross, and took a deep breath. I'm not here to destroy anyone's reputation, I began, but to protect the part of me that survived years of being ignored, dismissed, and controlled. I told them about growing up invisible, about how my accomplishments were met with shrugs, how my sister's B+ was celebrated more than my scholarships. I told them about the engagement party, the demand for my home, the wedding slap, and the years that led up to that final blow. I didn't leave home because I stopped loving them, I said. I left because I finally realized they never truly loved me, only the version of me they could use. The courtroom was silent. Their defense lawyer argued that Richard had lost control in the heat of the moment and that this was being blown out of proportion. But the evidence didn't lie. The videos, the blood, the witnesses, all told the same truth. At the end of the 3rd day, the jury left to deliberate. They returned less than 2 hours later. I stood, hands clenched at my sides, as the foreperson, a woman with graying hair and a clear voice, read the verdict. We find the defendants, Richard Walker and Diane Walker, guilty of assault, emotional abuse, and attempted coercion of property. I closed my eyes for just a second.
Not to cry,
but to breathe. Judge Ross leaned forward, her voice like iron wrapped in velvet. This court sentences Richard and Diane Walker to 8 years in the Illinois State Prison, with no eligibility for parole for 6. Additionally, the court awards the plaintiff, Emma Walker, $320,000 in damages, including medical costs, emotional distress, and legal fees. Gasps rippled across the courtroom, but all I could hear was the sound of justice. My mother turned toward me as they were handcuffed, not with remorse, but with blame. I didn't flinch. They had never listened to me before, but now the entire world had. After the verdict, as I stepped out of the courthouse, the sky over Rosewood was overcast but somehow calming. It had rained earlier that morning, and the stone steps were still damp beneath my shoes. But the storm, the real one, had already passed. I stood at the top, the court order in my hand, my name printed in bold above the word plaintiff. I had done it. David stood beside me, silent but steady, just as he had been through it all. There were no reporters, no flashing cameras, no news vans. Just a few bystanders, some curious onlookers, and the subtle scent of wet leaves in the wind. "Emma," David said, his voice low, "I know this wasn't the ending you ever wanted with your family, but I hope it's the beginning of something better." I turned to him, surprised to see him reaching into his coat. A small, velvet box. He didn't kneel. He didn't make a speech. He simply opened it and asked, "Will you let me be your family now?" I stared at the ring. It was silver, simple, with a tiny stone, not flashy, not loud. Just like him.
just like me.
I nodded.
Yes.
100 times yes. We didn't have a grand wedding. Instead, 2 months later, we held a quiet ceremony in the backyard of my $500,000 house. The cherry tree was in bloom, its soft pink blossoms like confetti from nature. I wore a pale blue dress. David's mother helped me zip it up. The guests were few, just those who had truly stood by me. Mark was there. So was Thomas Carter, who officiated the wedding himself. I wrote my own vows. "I don't promise a perfect life," I said, voice trembling, but I promise to never forget who I am again. And I promise to never let anyone take that from me. David answered with one line. You'll never fight alone again. We planted lavender along the fence that weekend. We painted the bedroom a warm beige. We built a bookshelf in the living room where I placed every journal, every book, and every award I once hid from sight. Sometimes I still have dreams about my parents, my mother yelling, my father's hand raised. But then I wake up, and the only thing I hear is David in the kitchen making coffee, humming softly. Chloe never called. And, honestly, I didn't expect her to. I don't hate her. I just no longer carry her weight. A few months after the trial, I received a handwritten letter in a plain envelope. It was from a woman in her 50s. She wrote, I've lived in silence for decades, thinking I deserved the way my family treated me. But your story gave me the strength to leave. Thank you. I sat with that letter for hours. And that's when I knew.
This wasn't just about me.
So, with Thomas and David's support, we started a nonprofit, the Ember Project, named for the part of yourself that refuses to go out, no matter how dark it gets. We help people reclaim their voices, their rights, and their peace after family abuse. This house, my house, became the headquarters. Now, every time I sit on that little balcony in the evening, with a book in my lap and lavender in the breeze, I remember the girl I once was. The girl who drew a flying horse and hid it under her bed. The girl who studied in silence and cried into a pillow. The girl who was never hugged, but hugged others anyway. I am that girl still. But now I am more. I am Emma Walker. And I am no longer a shadow. I am sunlight. I am strength. And I am free. Thank you for watching this powerful story. If Emma's journey inspired you, or reminded you of your own silent strength, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel for more real and emotional stories every week. Your support helps us keep telling the stories that deserve to be heard.